Well, let's begin. Cool. Welcome, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us at Because We Care. This is a conversation series where we talk honestly about the realities of caregiving, not just the tasks and logistics, but the emotional weight, family dynamics, difficult decisions, and everyday moments that come with caring for someone we love. Today, we're talking about caring from afar. For many of us, care doesn't happen neatly under one. It happens across cities, time zones, text threads, phone calls, updates, and moments when we're trying to stay involved even when we can't physically be there. So today we'll be talking about what long-distance caregiving really looks like, how we stay connected, how we coordinate support, how we manage guilt and uncertainty, and how we figure out what presence can mean when proximity isn't always possible. Before we jump in, though, I'd love for each of us just to, briefly introduce ourselves and what brings Julia and Kirsten and myself to this conversation about caregiving from afar. So, I'll start with a quick intro. My name is Adrian Chung, and I write under the Substack Caregiving Practically Speaking. I write about caregiving, responsibility, and the invisible work families do behind the scenes. My writing explores how we care for someone we love while navigating family expectations, healthcare complexity, work, relationships, and just trying to have our own lives alongside it. Julia.
All right, thank you, Adrian, and thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Julia Yarbo. My Substack is Keeping It Real Caregiving, and I chose that name because as I was on my journey of caring for my elderly, now deceased mother, I felt that quite often I would dig out information that was available, but it felt as if it was put through an organization or put through filters. And I thought, well, I'm living with something a little bit different because it was very hands-on. And as my mother aged, it became extremely hands-on, the types of topics that very few people want to talk about. The daily living, the toileting, the mobility, some of those really serious issues with health care. I'm a former broadcast journalist, and so as I continued on my caregiving journey, it was almost a calling to share my experiences and what I was learning and some of the resources I was finding to help others, because I have come to realize, and I think anybody out there caregiving knows, that you don't know what you don't know until it's thrown in your face, and by then it might be too late. And now you're in a crisis and you go, oh my God, what am I doing? So I hope over the years that I've helped people by sharing information. So that's what brings me to this conversation. So Adrian and Kirsten, thank you so much for all of your work in this caregiving space.
Thank you.
I'll go next. So my Who Gets the China podcast and blog support those of us who are struggling to balance the needs of aging parents with also just living our own best life. And so my goal is to really help caregivers get prepared with advice, strategies, community, and some laughter, so we can minimize the stress and maximize our own quality of life and our own well-being while we are on this journey. And my background is really in communications and strategy. By day, I work at a healthcare organization helping families navigate care journeys. And on the weekends, I fulfill my passion for blogging about life with older parents. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. Sure. Let's start with perhaps a lightning round. Kirsten, what has been the biggest emotional challenge for you when it comes to remote caregiving?
Guilt. I feel guilty that I'm not there. I wish my parents lived right next door. I wish I could pop over on a Tuesday night when something's going wrong and pick my mom up and take her to church or do whatever's required. So I think I just feel a lot of guilt that I'm not always showing up the way that I want to. But it's just not realistic when we're living in different states, an airplane ride away. So that is, I think, the thing that I struggle with the most, and work really hard to do the best job I can with the resources that I do have, and use a lot of the strategies we're going to talk about today to feel good about that I'm doing the best that I can, despite being a 2-hour plane ride away. What about one of you? What's your emotional feeling about all this?
Julia, go ahead. We're going in reverse.
So So as I mentioned, my mom has now passed, and I lost mom 5 years ago. And as I was caring for her, I was never a long distance caregiver, but I was the primary point person. So basically, all of my other siblings were long distance. So I come at this from the flip side, and what I can tell you is that there was a lot of my emotional challenge was the anger and frustration that I felt as if I was the one having to carry the heavy burden, the heavy load. That when I had those times when I would hit the wall and say, why isn't anybody helping me? And there's nobody here to give me a break, and there's nobody here to handle all the holidays, all the birthdays, all the special moments, running the errands, getting the doctor's medications, getting to the doctor's appointments. And so one of the aspects for me was, how do I navigate my own emotions so that I can care effectively for my mother and not come out on the other end where I just don't like my family anymore? Which, that sounds like such a harsh thing to say, but you're frustrated, right? Because they don't understand. They're not there with you. And like you, Kirsten, it was, how do I balance out my own life, my work, my household, the things that were important to me, knowing that what was important to me was also giving my mom the best care possible. So I think that feeling of guilt and anger was merged, not because I wasn't there, but because I was in the household and just so desperately wanted some extra help. And I think that is a topic that we hear a lot from our respective readers of, you're so filled with emotions that you don't know where to place them. In my case, I started writing and hoping to help others to recognize these items and then chart out a path. So we will talk about that some more.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think for me, the toughest emotional baggage was really just this sense of I'm not in control of anything. And you're just like trying to dodge things and be flexible and be nimble and adjust to things as they come your way. But just that sense of, what keeps you up late at night? It's like, oh, could mom have fallen? Or why is her phone off? Or why is she not responding? Why, there's like a whole list of things. And just that sense of distance means that that silence is kind of deafening. And that just gives space for you to just worry and fill it with your own concerns. So a lot of what, how I've been trying to adjust and adapt is really thinking through, planning and trying to, ensure that she understands what concerns she should be looking out for, and how, she should also be prepared, and, making sure the people around her that live in the same building, neighbors, are aware of what her needs are and what might crop up, and those things. So that's really been the challenge that I've had to face in terms of trying to, hold that worry, but knowing that things are just happening over there, and there's like, 15-hour time difference between us.
Yeah, that makes it especially hard. I mean, the time difference of, are you asleep? Are you awake? I mean, even a 2-hour time difference can be tough, because also I think as people get older, the window of tolerance for meaningful conversation shifts. Even myself, for that matter. Don't call me at 10 p.m. and want to have a meaningful conversation about something. I'm done. I'm on my way to bed. So like navigating that piece of it adds complexity that being 2 hours away doesn't even have. So I think that's a good segue actually into talking about what are some of the ways we solve for these challenges, because we've all put technology to use and community to use. And I think we want to talk on a couple of those things. So maybe does somebody want to jump in with a piece of technology that you feel has really supported you used, Julia, like during your remote caregiving journey? What works?
Because I'm toggling back and forth with my mute button, making sure it's good. So my time with my mom was, I lived rural. So I'll say that first. I was in rural Northern California. As crazy as it sounds to some people, at the time, our internet connectivity wasn't that great. Neither was cell service in the home, right? So I had to look at the landscape and say, okay, I can't just look at those commercials and think about, one of the alert call buttons where you could make sure that your loved one has it if they fall or they get hurt or something happens, they can press a button and it sends an alert. That wouldn't work in my household because I may not get a cell signal. So I had to work backwards and go, okay, what can I do to put into place where I can still utilize some technology and make sure that things are safe? Two things. If you happen to live in a location like that, and I know it's old school, having a landline in your home, like old school phone, landline. Some people don't even know what landline means. I had a news producer one time say, "What's a landline?" Right? I thought, oh, age difference. But depending on where you live, having an old school hardwired phone may be your option, because then there are companies that offer the emergency tags that could be worn or on a wrist. You can then set that up in your house where it basically connects into the phone. So it still can call out, but it's not a cell signal. It takes a little bit of research. So depending on where you live, start early. Think about where your loved ones live if you're not next to them. Is that something you could look up in your area? It's not as easy as just finding the ads that you may see in a magazine. It took me a while to find the service that I had. It depends on your phone carrier, it depends on where you live. So that's one thing that I would definitely say. If you live remote and you are a long distance caregiver, start your research on that aspect early. That was very helpful to me, gave me some good peace of mind.
I think one piece of technology that actually my mom volunteered, which I was a little bit surprised by, was actually just installing a webcam in the corner of her living room. And I was like, okay, so you don't mind that I, will be checking in periodically just to make sure that, you're active and living your life. And she's like, oh no, I feel better because now I feel that, there's eyes on me and I'm not entirely alone. But even at that, if that feels too invasive, I know that there are also companies or new companies that they're leveraging audio as a way to detect whether there's still movement going on in the home, or also detect falls as well. And they're able to send you notifications if anything's happened. So there's an emerging field of technologies that are offering this sort of like an ambient monitoring that isn't as invasive as, say, a camera. I think there's also a new one that's actually even just using Wi-Fi signals and how Wi-Fi signals kind of move around people and shapes, and in order to kind of see whether there's anything going on at home. But that's definitely been a technology that I found.
Ooh, I never knew that existed. That's amazing. I love that because it's not as invasive. Video feels like it could potentially be a little bit too Big Brother. But I did talk to a security expert a while back, and I said, what's the first thing you would do if this was going on with your folks? And he said, I would get a video doorbell and a video camera on the front door. You must have that. You don't realize even now why that's going to be so important, but you want to be able to see who's coming to their house, right? And then also in a subsequent conversation I had with a dementia expert, they called out that sometimes people can become wanderers or wanderesses when they have dementia. And so not only is it a way to monitor who's coming into the house, but it's a way of monitoring who is going out of the home. And again, I hadn't even thought about that, but getting those systems in place. And to your point, Julia, they're not necessarily turnkey. It takes a minute to get the video set up, get all the technology working. And so earlier is better than late, as I know that's a common refrain, but I haven't done the interior cameras yet. I'm still sticking with the outside, but it's actually been pretty remarkable to just get those eyes on.
Right. And it closes that distance as well. Sorry.
Oh no, just hearing that, I'm for those who are joining us and who haven't had a chance to get to know me, I always like to throw in the rural aspect, having lived that. Getting a set of eyes on your loved ones in their home. If you go old school set of eyes, means your neighbors, right? So remember, some people say there's always every neighborhood where there's maybe one or two people that are those busybodies. Okay, busybodies are your friends. Okay, busybodies are the people you want in your life at this point. Because they notice if there's a blue car in the driveway and they go, well, wait a minute, Sally's daughter drives a red car. What's that blue car? And then they'll go ask another neighbor, or they'll come over and find out because they want to know whose car that is, right? It is excellent. And I know in the world we're in right now, quite often people may not know their neighbors. I get it. But I would encourage you to step outside of maybe that how we're all in little silos. Get to know your neighbors. It doesn't mean you have to have coffee with them every morning and borrow sugar, but get to know your neighbors so that they have that extra set of eyes. They can notice that, well, wait a minute. Sally's usually out walking every morning and I didn't see her come out this morning. Maybe I need to go knock on the door and see if everything's okay.
Yeah, I love that. The busybody is your best friend when you're a remote caregiver. My kids tease me that I'm becoming the neighborhood busybody. And I mean, I do like to see what's going on, but I had a friend she was a remote caregiver, and the request was that every morning when her dad woke up, that he would turn the blinds open. And a neighbor on her dog walk would go to make sure that the blinds were open, that he was awake, and that if something happened and the blinds were not opened, that was a red flag. And that did happen one day. The blinds were not open. She was able to call my friends and my friend and realize that her dad had fallen and he needed emergency attention right away. And so that is a very low tech, community based symbol to watch out for, just to make sure that someone's keeping tabs. Perfect for your neighborhood busybody.
Yeah. And it's a reminder that, so often in our world, I think we get busy, right? We all have issues, and especially with caregiving, we feel like we're the only ones handling it. And chances are somebody else around you is experiencing it as well. I mean, the stats don't lie. 63 million American caregivers based on 2026 research. Okay, that's pretty much like everybody, right? So someone is also in this boat. And this is where we have to reach out to one another just to check what's going on, even if it's sharing phone numbers. I'll take it one step further. My former neighborhood, we had a master neighborhood list where everybody on the street, we have a roster. I'm still on it, actually. I don't live there anymore, but it was the home address, the name of the people who live there, the telephone numbers for the occupants, email addresses for everybody, what cars you had, what pets you had, and a contact number for emergencies. And it was a master list that then was mailed out to everybody. So we all could check on each other. Old school, but wonderful tool. And even if it's 3 or 4 people on your street, that's something that you could utilize to keep eyes if you're a long distance caregiver.
Absolutely. I mean, sort of like taking that further, I think I'd shared previously that, my neighbor actually, so he lives with his caregiver who instantly had a fall. And so he was sort of alone trying to take care of himself. And I saw the ambulance come. And so afterwards I went to check in on him and, did a little bit of cooking, tried to make sure that he felt comfortable. My husband and I went over a couple of times. But when his daughter, who lives in a different state, came up and visited, she's like, thanks very much, Adrian, but, could we exchange numbers so that, if anything were to happen, I can contact you or you can contact me directly. And I was like, of course, this is, I'd be very, very happy to do that. So, just going out and connecting with the neighbors of your loved one and, building that sense of community is really, really powerful. And it's not just necessarily a one-way street. Actually, so when we were traveling, when we came back, my neighbor actually was like, hey, I noticed that your blinds weren't opening and closing. Were you guys doing okay? I was worried about your dog. And I was like, hey, we had everything under control, but thanks for watching out, over our own home, our own house, and making sure that, everything was all right on that front as well. So it goes both ways. It's a two-way street.
It does go both ways. It's nice. Sharing is caring, right? So I wondered about things that we can ask other long distance caregivers to do with us. I'm thinking about siblings in my case, or maybe other friends. I mean, do you have strategies for employing that broader long distance community, if you will? What's worked for you guys in terms of saying, we need to provide this cushion of support, even though multiples of us are away? How do you enlist your community to help you.
Can I ask a slightly different but related question?
Yes, please.
And I mean, this also goes back to sibling dynamic. And yeah, my sister, she also lives very far away. So she lives in Europe, which is like, 10 hours in the wrong direction.
Right.
In terms of time. And the challenge was because it's like, every time that something has happened, I've been asleep. And it's actually been my sister that's been awake to receive the call from my uncle or from the hospital. And so she's then had to deal with it. And then, then it gets passed on to me because it's time for her bed and suddenly I'm waking up. But what that distance has meant that we also need to be really coordinated around just knowing what's going on, but also what kind of decisions we would need to make. And this could be, actual medical decisions or even, who finding the right care for whenever mom is discharged from the hospital, because we might not be able to have that discussion in real time because of the time difference. So that's just something that's meant that my sister have had to have these conversations earlier on and, play out different scenarios and think, how should we react to this? Or what would happen if that? Who would we, potentially rely on or reach out to? So that's one kind of general planning question. And I think another element is also, depending on the severity of the situation, if somebody needs to kind of be the family first responder and just get on a plane and go, how would you manage and coordinate that? So, I have a bit more flexibility versus my sister right now because of her career. So, even right now, it's been a month since my mom had her fall. So I was the first responder. I went back, I took her to all her medical checkups. But when I was planning that with my sister, she's like, okay, I will come back in 3-4 weeks time. And so she's gone back to kind of hand off, exchange the baton. And that's how we've managed to distribute that care. But also just like be on the same page around, okay, we need to make sure that we get the scans from the MRI. We talk to this doctor, then we find the long-term care, et cetera. And just kind of having that roadmap or game plan really just creates, it makes it, there are fewer friction points.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds just like working with your sibling around this and managing the care together.
Yeah, and assigning those roles, I think, or not even assigning, but agreeing on those roles. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, we do the same thing. It's like, this is, my sister's a teacher. So in the summer, it's a little easier for her. So it's like, okay, this emergency, you're going to go be triage. I'll follow up. And then sometimes it has to flip.
And I'll add to that, and I think we all hear it from different caregivers that, and I mentioned it, you feel like you're the one doing all the work if you're the primary, whether you're physically there with your loved one or long distance. And if you're long distance, you want to be there and you want to handle everything. Having a strategy with other family members, or if there aren't any other siblings and it's just you and your long distance, right? Building out that core around yourself, whether it's 1 or 2 neighbors or some other friends of your loved ones. But having a conversation ahead of time of asking the tough questions. Is this a role you even want? And I know we may think it's a sibling, you have a sibling. Well, of course they're going to split the care for mom or dad or uncle or aunt. Maybe they don't want to. We have to accept the fact that not everybody emotionally wants to step into this role, whether it's their parent or not, right? And I think we have to respect that. We don't have to like it, but each person has that choice. So have that conversation. Is the person that you believe is going to be your partner in this, do they know they're going to be your partner in this? And do they want that role? If they do, then ask them, okay, you're not physically there either. What can you handle? What do you want to handle? And maybe even what you want to handle, ask that first. So that when you split out those duties, it doesn't feel to that person that they're taking on something that they truly do not want. As I mentioned, my siblings were all distant, so they could offer to help in certain ways. I had one sibling say, I'm so glad you're handling mom because I don't have the wherewithal to do any of this. And I thought, okay, but this person is really organized They have financial means. They can help me when I have to research things. Maybe if I need extra help with respite, I could say, can you cover the fee for X, Y, and Z? They're not going to show up on hand and help me day to day with my mother. They weren't going to do that. Yes, it's their mother too, but they weren't cut out for that. But they could help me by offering support. So make sure if you're in that caregiving role and you are long distance, that you're having those tough conversations. Don't ever assume that other people in your circle are feeling it and seeing it the same way you are, because they may not be. And you have miscommunication of who's doing what, when, why, the depth of their feeling for it. Make sure you're all on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
What is your favorite piece of everyday technology that you use to sort of share information with your other siblings or deal with, like for me, I'm going to be honest, it's the computer. I mean, dealing with electronic health records, doctor's appointments, passwords, like that is a real pain point for me right now. And I have tried various strategies for being able to access the computer remotely and sharing passwords, and things are working relatively well. Like some of the innate Apple things do work pretty well, but just curious, like, is there anything that you can't live without from a technology standpoint?
I mean, for me, it's very much been WhatsApp, but there are kind of constraints even within WhatsApp as a communication platform. I mean, we have a thread. It's myself, my sister, my mom. And even when we're having those intense moments when we're talking about, okay, how do we coordinate care? If you need to look back at that, several months down the line, suddenly it's all mixed in with a whole bunch of cat pictures, which I love. I can look at cat pictures for until the cows come home, or the cats come home.
You've been in my email threads, haven't you?
Exactly. That's great. I hear they do well on Substack, so I should post more.
Yeah, they tell us that.
But just like the immediacy and the simplicity of it has also meant it's been easy for my mom to also be part of the conversation, and I feel that she's also fully engaged in the discussion. Whereas I tried showing her kind of the Google Workspace and Google Drive, and it wasn't for her. So just trying to use that technology, partly because it's so accessible to her, has been really powerful.
Yeah, the text chat string, and Julia, I don't know, I can't remember exactly all the time frames when you were doing your caregiving and how useful it was, but I will say having all the text strings now is kind of a saving grace, although I have to laugh sometimes. One of my parents might not realize what they're texting and what text string, and then all of a sudden you get some sort of funny message to like all the cousins, and probably they're not that interested, but regardless, we can navigate it. But to your point, it does kind of keep relevant conversation topics organized and aligned. And you can kind of go back and say, remember, we agreed we're going to have this doctor's appointment on this day. Is that going to work for you? I can be there. I can't. So I think using those tools is great. But to your point, you've got to find a way to organize them and keep them accessible for everybody all the time, which isn't always easy.
You guys are probably sick of me saying this. Sometimes always remembering old school pen and paper.
Yeah.
As crazy as it is, sometimes rather than creating charts and forms and documents, I'm a big believer in having a bullet point of what you need. Yeah, I love the
right there. I'm right here with you.
You make a list, you take a scan of it, and you send it, and then send it to yourself as well, right? So then you still have a trail of all the information. It may not all be in one long stream, and then title it very specific, just like we do in our business lives, right? Mom's medications 12/24/12, and then and send that to everybody. Then it's a hard copy.
Yeah.
And update it as needed.
I love that. And I was reminded by one of the experts I talked to on my podcast, make sure that your post forms, your most forms, your power of attorney, those all need to be in a file on your phone. I mean, and on your laptop, but those need to be saved as digital files that you can find in an emergency and that you could also then email to your parent or text to your parent or the surrogate caregiver who is in the moment at the ER, which was a situation we just had not that long ago where we couldn't be there, but somebody else was there. And so in those moments where stress is happening, we can't always think clearly or quickly. And so having a file on your phone that is literally labeled emergency information for mom or dad, so that in a crisis situation, you know where it is, you can get it to them. Because if you can't find it, chances are good they can't either. And so trying to just help yourself by organizing your digital files is always a good strategy.
It truly is, and I love that you mentioned that. I had recently shared some articles on getting all of your documents in order as well after another personal experience with a family member. And what I would do when I was caring for mom was I would make sure that I had the digitals, but I would keep the hard copies and make sure that there are several hard copies at your loved one's property. If you're long distance, have that master binder.
Yeah.
And leave a package of those maybe in their office space. Maybe there's one in the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. Maybe there's one in the kitchen, in that famous master junk drawer that every household seems to have. Wherever it is, have several copies, right? If you're not there physically and there has to be a call to EMS and they show up, somebody has to be able to get all of that information for your loved one.
Yeah.
If you've made scans of all of those documents, have it sent up to the cloud digitally, but then email it to yourself so that wherever you're at, it's actually in your email and you can open it, right? Because you may be someplace that you can't get connectivity or get a signal to be able to download the files. But if you have them saved right in front of you, I'm a big believer in hard copies. I've got a lot of
love it.
now, but if it gets eaten up or you don't have access to it, it doesn't do you any good. And then again, your relatives, a neighbor, even if it's one trusted person, they don't have to know what's in that binder. But if they know that master binder is in that file cabinet in the bottom drawer, blue binder with the picture of the cat on the front. Don't be fooled by the cat. It's the important papers, right? It's really each family has to think, okay, well, what's going to make sense for me? And take the time now to do it in advance, because you won't be able to handle all of this in the middle of a crisis.
Mm-hmm. I'm reminded of Adrian's post about the go bag. And I think I reflected the last time, I wished I had it the last time. And so now we've got some steps in place to have that ready. But it's not just about a water bottle and slippers and a cell phone charger. It's, again, like you just said, Julia, having those printed copies, old school, in a place where whoever's coming to help can have access to them. And this is a place where duplication is something that we want. It's better to have more than not enough. So I love that.
Most definitely. And I think I shared last time that I was in our last Because We Care, I had just come home from an emergency visit with a family member who was very ill. And all of this had come into play, that none of the important paperwork, nobody knew where it was at. And just a sheer nightmare. I finally was told where it was at. Whole long story, but it doesn't have to be that way. I think all of us, 10 years ago, we weren't talking about caregiving to the extent that so many people are now, right? The numbers are increasing. More people are sharing information. The only reason that we don't find the information is that we don't go looking for it, because it is a tough situation, right? Who wants to talk about the realities of planning all of this when you can go hang out and enjoy some nice weather? But the reality is if you don't do it now, it's worse for you because you've never heard of these terms. You don't know what your documents are. You don't know what your doctors or your emergency teams will need, and especially if you're long distance. The reality is all of us are aging, right? No matter what age we are, all of us are aging. If you have parents that are still alive and they are aging, they are going to continue to get older. Look at the landscape and say, is there going to come a time, maybe in a year or two, that I may be called on to help mom and dad? If that answer is even remotely yes, even that much, yes, start researching what would you put in place if you had to help them and you got a call from them next week that they had taken a fall. What would you do? Start there and then begin working backwards, because it's different for every family.
Yeah, sort of taking that and kind of like connecting back to sort of some of the emotional challenges and baggage that we've experienced at the very beginning. I think that the more we talk about caregiving, the better. It becomes part of like the overall conversation. And as I was reflecting on some of the challenges that we've all emotionally faced, as we've been running this series over the past couple of months, I do believe that sharing is caring. And I've been more kind of outspoken about talking about caregiving with my friends and with my peers who are actually now at a point where they're noticing how much their parents are aging. And maybe it's the first time that their parent is encountering like a big sickness, such as, a good friend last week, her mom was diagnosed with cancer. And so now we're having these discussions a lot more. And she's asking, hey, Adrian, tell me more about these things, like medical directive, power of attorney. How does this all kind of play into my role as a daughter trying to navigate cancer care? Not just to mention the emotional kind of trauma of seeing your parent have to undergo radiotherapy or chemotherapy. So I think that the more that we talk about it, the more that we share, I think the more that we'll also be surprised about what we hear, because a lot of folks I don't think are talking about it, but they also have important stories and perspectives to share. And I think that that's just good for the whole community.
I think so too. I agree. I think that one of the things that's empowering about this is hearing what other people have been through. And maybe you learn a couple useful tips and tricks, but maybe you just also feel less alone, less isolated, less scared, less anxious. And so I think talking about it and shedding light on it has tremendous value, because like you guys both said, we're all going to go through some form of this sometime in our life. And by being prepared, for me anyway, it takes away some of the overall anxiety. It gives me a feeling that I have some control. I have some knowledge. I'm prepared somewhat. I know curveballs are going to come from every direction, but I'm prepared for the ones I can expect, right? I'm ready for the fly ball. I'm going to be out there to catch that. Whatever else is going on, I don't know. But a little bit of knowledge planning gives me some comfort and makes me feel a little bit less overwhelmed.
That's an excellent point. There will be curveballs. Take it from me. I thought I had covered everything that could be covered, and it still just bowled me over of things that came up. And most of the items that came up, and this is the difference between I think our discussions and discussions that you might hear that are part of a larger organization that always have to make sure that they say and do the exact right things because it's an organization. The reality is each community is different. Your resources will be different. The level of training is different. If you are a caregiver and family of color, your resources and care and how you're treated in public places may likely be different. These are the sorts of things that if you take the time to have preparation in advance, you at least can go in armed with knowledge. That is vital. That you have to come at this with showing up, already having some information. Do not wait or anticipate or think that a service provider is going to just offer you up the information. Chances are they may not. You have to know what questions to ask, right? And I always say to people, you have to be an advocate, and especially if you're a long distance caregiver, right? Think about, what can I do now? What can I ask now? What can I put in place now? and anticipate if there's a gap, right? Anticipate if your loved one may be talked over or down to or dismissed, right? Think about all of these elements, and then you take the steps to put as much as you can in place before you need the services and the help.
Yeah.
Absolutely vital.
Yeah. That's important.
Information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I know we're 10 minutes over, but I'm really glad that we did go over. And I mean, the audience is still here, so I hope they also enjoyed this.
So it actually, if I can jump in, so there was Jennifer, thank you for sharing in the chat the product Caregiver Smart Solution. I am not familiar with that. I think I'll look that up and check it out, but thank you for sharing that. When we were talking about different tech items, something that I wanted to also make sure to mention, especially if you're long distance, take some time to reach out to your local police department, fire department, and sheriff's department, depending on, each community is slightly different. The community that I recently moved from, our fire department had a program called Community Connect. And it was a tech service provided through the fire department that basically, if you lived in that city, you could call the fire department, or you could just go online and you sign up for it. And that way you put in all of your personal information into the program so that it's already in their dispatch, right? So let's say there's an incident at 211 Elm Street. Oh no, that's mom and dad's house. Well, instantly, fire department can now see that here's the couple who lives here. One has diabetes, one has Alzheimer's. Here's the medicine they take. One is in a wheelchair, one has an oxygen tank. Here's the contact information for their loved ones. Here's their doctor, right? All of that information can be loaded in so that dispatch doesn't have to get there to the house and then try to figure it all out.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Different agencies offer different programs. Take the time to reach out. And this is, again, old school, right? The difference between maybe one of your sheriff's deputies goes, oh, that's Bill and Mary over on Elm Street. Yeah, I met their daughter who came out to introduce herself when she was here visiting, right? So check to see what programs your individual community has. You may be surprised that it could be that extra set of eyes, and if it's EMS, that's maybe 4 or 5 extra sets of eyes.
Thanks for sharing that. That's
Yeah.
something I didn't know, which is another great reason for us to all get together and share our experiences and our best practices and our tips and tricks. So thank you.
Sure.
Great. Well,
hang tough, everybody.
Indeed.
Thanks for bringing us together, Adrian. I feel like you're the ringleader, the introducer, the closer. I just wanted to say that we met on Substack together completely organically and have really enjoyed learning from one another and sharing our stories and building our community. So thanks to everyone who's tuning in now and everybody who will be tuning in later. And as always, love every bit of perspective and advice that you all have to share. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, everybody. And yes, always give yourself grace as you're on the caregiving journey. There's always more to learn, but there's always room to give yourself a good pat on the back for the work that you're doing.
Well said.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone. Bye.
All right. Bye.